Hi, and welcome to Beginning Programming. Today is the third installment, and today I wanted to look at how to add controllers to your system, add views, and do a bit of routing. And if we have some extra time, I will look at lazy loading of controllers. But first, let's get down to creating controllers and routing. So this is basically the solution as we left it at the end of part 2. I've added some styling in here, but we're not going to look at that. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to add routing. And now when you look at our Bower components, we only have AngularJS here, and we're going to use Angular route, so Ngroute. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do Bower install Angular route. And this will add the Bower package for AngularJS. And actually, we might want to save that to our Bower file. So Bower has this JSON file and we want to add it in here. So one of the things you do after you've added one of these AngularJS modules is you're going to go to your main file. And here we're going to specify Angular route, which is in the Bower components / Angular route / Angular route. So this is going to be the file that we're going to reference. And now, of course, for one of our shims, we need to add that Angular route depends on AngularJS. Okay. So instead of referencing Angular here, I'm now just going to reference Angular route, which will ensure that my Angular dependency is also loaded. So we can test this in our browser, and as you can see, everything still works. So let's open up our DevTools and make sure that we don't have any hidden bugs. So this is the first part of routing. One of the things I like to do when I look at my application is I like to structure it the way I am going to be working with it. So I like to create components and I like to create modules where they are necessary. But what I also do is I segment my applications in folders and files. So let's look at how I would structure an application. What we've seen so far is my home controller. Well, basically my home controller is not what I need in a default application. What I do need is a main controller, and a main controller usually does not have a title. So what is a main controller? A main controller is something that wraps the entire page. So inside of our main controller, we can do stuff like some global variables. So one of the things you would usually register is how big the screen is, so you can do some folding of the content. Now, what we do have, or let's back it up to the index.html. So what you see on the body, I usually reference my main controller. Now, on some other part of the page, I usually scaffold my my view. So it's something like this. So now that we have our view, we're going to configure our routes. So one of the things we do is we add a dependency to Ngroute. And what I like to do is I like to segment every part of every module with its own routes. so that once you decide to leave a module out, those routes are not loaded. Lazy loading of the controllers helps a lot with keeping your transactions over the internet as small as possible. But not loading modules when they're not needed is another technique which you can use to keep everything as small as you can. So core module dot configure. Config is a phase in which we can configure our services. So inside of this configuration, we're going to configure our routes. So we have a route provider. And on this route provider, we can specify when, and it's home. So the route is home, and so what we're going to look at here is we're going to specify some extra information. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to pass in a controller, and this will be the actual name of the controller. So we're going to create a home controller, and we have not changed this to the main controller. So we're going to add a home controller, and we're going to have a template URL which will point at dash app. Let me see, where did I add the static routes? /app, yes. /app, /modules, /core, /views, /home.html. So that is what I'm going to be pointing at. Now, we might also want to have a default, and I always use the home controller as a default as well. These are just conventions, you don't have to follow these, but I like to consider the home controller also the default controller that you're pointing at. So we can also specify an otherwise, and we're going to be doing that later on in this video to refer to an error page or something like that. So the default is an empty thing. So one of the things we need to do is we need to add a home controller. So inside of our controllers folder, we're going to add a JavaScript file called home controller, and we're going to register this controller with our module. Always remember to pass in your parameters as strings as well, because if you ever want to minify your JavaScript files, this is the only way to get that done. So here we can add a title, scope.title equals home. And now within our views folder, which I'm going to create right now, I'm going to add a HTML file called home, which will just have an h1 title. So this is basically the only thing we need to do to set up routing in an AngularJS application. So we've added a route provider, and we added a home controller and a home view. Now, one of the last things we need to do is we need to actually make sure that this home controller is loaded when we require this controller. So inside of my controller references, I am going to add a reference to modules, core, controllers, okay. So when we refresh this, we will see that we get the word home, and this is because inspect element. This is because we are inside of our main controller with our view bound to the home controller. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it like this for this episode. And in the next episode, we're going to look at how we can achieve lazy loading with our controllers. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Bye.